Hi everyone, Psychosorcerer here, and today I wanted to talk about the possibility of explaining the occult and magic using modern-day scientific and psychological terms. A lot of people seem to think that either magic is fictional or magic is supernatural, or they believe that magic could be explained by science but can't be explained by any science that we have currently. I believe this isn't actually true. I believe that with our current modern-day understanding of how our brains work, we can actually explain what the ancients were talking about in the various occult practices, and I'd like to do that here. Now, for those practitioners of magic that are listening who believe in a very spiritual or religious view of how magic works, I'm not saying that your views aren't correct. I'm not trying to say that this is the definitive explanation of magic. More, it's a theory that can work alongside of modern thinking. If, however, you're someone who's a skeptical atheist and as a result you think that magic is a bunch of mumbo-jumbo and not worth your time to research, this is geared more towards you. This is to show that in actuality, magic may be worth your time. Perhaps it's a turn-off to you because it's called magic, but once you understand what's really going on, you'll see how it could be a valuable tactic and technique used in your day-to-day life. It'll also demystify a lot of what seems like supernatural or fictitious language. It's taken me many years to decode the language of many of these arcane texts, and I'm not talking about the different languages that they were written in. I'm talking about the words they used to describe things. But what you're going to find is that in those days, they didn't have the same vocabulary we had now. Ideas like subconscious mind and conscious mind didn't exist, so they used different terms for that. And I'm going to walk you through that and an explanation of how all of what the ancients once talked about as magic could be described as controlling your own psyche. To understand the value of any of these occult practices, we first have to understand the concepts of the conscious and subconscious mind. The conscious mind is the part of your mind that's responsible for logic and reasoning. It's the part of your mind that seems to be aware. It's what we think of as ourselves. It's what concentrates on the past, the future. It's what shapes the story of our own lives to ourselves and gives ourselves an ego or a persona. The subconscious mind is the part of your mind responsible for all involuntary actions, such as breathing and heart rate, but it also has a lot more to do than that. We used to believe that the conscious mind was the only part of our brain present and active in the moment, and that the subconscious mind was more of a repository where you could store data, memories, and things of that nature, in addition to its functions of controlling the human body. However, we've since found that that's absolutely incorrect. It's actually the conscious mind that stores this data and that has a concept of the past and the future. And the subconscious mind is the mind that's aware and awake in the moment. This means that our conscious only looks at the world through the lens of things that have already happened or things that will happen. The information that comes into your brain from your senses goes to the subconscious mind where it's processed. Your reactions usually occur before it gets to the conscious mind. The conscious mind then takes that information and formulates a story from it, figuring out why things happened, what it all means, and that's the part of you that you experience as the thinking, intelligent individual. But the subconscious has often already made the decision of what to do next before waiting for the conscious mind to catch up. The conscious mind is mostly just creating a narrative as to why things happened in what order, so that you can have an understanding of what you're doing. Now, this may sound counterintuitive to many people because this is new to neuroscience. It's a more recent finding. And because of our tendency to justify our actions after they occur, it's easy to miss the fact that we didn't actually think about those actions before they occurred. Does this mean that we're actually just passengers inside our own mind, explaining to ourselves what this body has done and actually in no control of it whatsoever? Not at all. You see, consciously we can decide to train ourselves or to undergo new habits, or to break old habits, to change our minds about things, to find new ways to do things, solve problems, etc. The way that we then change the subconscious mind is through repetition. The subconscious mind understands habit. It understands previously performed actions. It understands successes over failures. It understands pain versus pleasure, things of that nature. As a result, if you do something habitually, you can train the subconscious mind to understand those things. This is why we as humans need to educate ourselves the way we do. If we just look at some information, we may consciously understand it, but we don't retain it, and we don't gain the ability to use that information later, unless we train our brain in much the same way that we train our muscles, by doing something over and over and over again until we get good at it. Controlling habits is the key to controlling the subconscious mind. Repetition is the key to controlling habits. And magic and the occult is all a matter of using repetition to change yourself. Many of our habits, for better or worse, were programmed habits that we picked up as children. Our parents' upbringing, our schooling, the values of our culture, the rules of our country. These sort of things shape how we think and what we do on a subconscious level. Even if you're someone who sees yourself as rebellious against any of those different aspects of your upbringing, it is still because of that upbringing that you're able to be rebellious against them. It isn't that your parents perhaps wanted you to have the values that you had, but rather it was from the way that your parents raised you that you saw what they were teaching you as wrong. In other words, the things that you think are right and the way to do things were instilled in you by an outside source when you were young, and through practice you found that they work. And the things that you think are bad were still pushed upon you by an outside source when you were young, but in your practices you saw that they didn't work, and as a result you thought that the people who tried to push those ideas on you were doing something wrong themselves. By following the pattern of trying to do what works and trying to push against what doesn't work, you created habits within yourself, ways to do things, and an overall personality in that you had a set of rules to follow whenever something occurred. The problem here is it's not the conscious mind that follows those rules, it's the subconscious. And you're not aware that you're following a set of rules consciously when they occur. Your subconscious reacts based on the pre-programmed rules. It is, in a sense, slave to what the conscious mind accepted and pushed in it through repetition, and at the same time the conscious mind is a slave to whatever the subconscious mind decides to do in the moment. So the only way to really have control of your life is to align your conscious and subconscious, to look at yourself in a very humble light and say, why did I do this? Why did I make this decision here? As opposed to justifying it in the narrative of your life, try to see if there's possibly a behavior or a habit that you have that causes you to make certain decisions that may impact your life negatively or positively. And once you find that, you can use further repetition to change that pattern if you so desire, or to enhance upon it. Most self-help gurus will tell you that negativity exists only in the mind. They'll tell you that by thinking positively, you can have more positive outcomes. They also often tell you to repeat a mantra in the morning. For example, you might say something like, I am successful, over and over again to yourself each morning. And then, in the future, you find that you are more successful than you were before. This is actually because you're performing a repetition and it's creating a habit within your subconscious mind. You're causing your subconscious mind to believe that you are successful by repeating it over and over again until the subconscious mind accepts it as a part of its new programming. The same is true with thinking positively or negatively. If you think negatively repeatedly, it's because you have a habit of thinking negatively. You look at different situations that are in and of themselves neutral, and you bestow negative aspects to them. You focus on the negative, because that's what you've been trained to do in your upbringing. If you instead change that to thinking positively, you'll start to see the positive in these neutral things instead. Or, if you train yourself to see them as neither negative or positive, you can see them as what they really are, objectively. However, this training has to be done over time. You have to practice this over and over and over again. And at first it feels like you're forcing yourself to feel a way that you don't feel, but if you do it enough, you'll find that it starts to become a part of you. This is using repetition to form new habits. It's how you break old habits and give yourself new ones. A lot of modern therapy relies on the method of trying to figure out why you act a certain way, what elements of your past made you that way, and then taking that information and accepting that it wasn't a conscious decision of your own. By doing so, you can then consciously choose to change what you do. You understand that you're not doing something because it's the way it has to be done, but rather because of some pre-programmed habit. And as a result, you're able to replace it with a new habit. The process, of course, takes weeks and weeks of continuously trying to look at things a different way or behave a different way or perform different behaviors. This, again, is just a method of using repetition to program new habits. So why have I just spent 9 minutes talking about the psychology of the conscious and subconscious mind, how we behave, our habits, our repetition, and how the modern world looks at those things, when what we're supposed to be talking about is magic and the occult? Well, prepare to follow me down the rabbit hole, and you'll have that answer for yourself. In the days of ancient civilizations, we did not have psychiatry, psychology, an understanding of neuroscience. We did not have an understanding of what dreams were, how the world really worked, why the stars moved the way they moved, or rather why our planet moved the way it moved, why we behave the way we behave, or how things in our upbringing affect the way we are. This means when you read the old manuscripts that later became the tenets of magic or occultism, You have to read them from the viewpoint that ideas like conscious and subconscious don't exist yet, the understanding of why we dream doesn't exist yet, the explanation of what the imagination is doesn't exist yet, and that the authors were trying to explain these things. A lot of people in the New Age who try to translate this occult knowledge don't take this into consideration. They assume that ideas like the third eye must be talking about something that most of us don't understand. They don't stop to think that perhaps the concept of the third eye is really a way of explaining visualization and imagination to a population that at the time didn't have those concepts. Sure, everybody already knew how to use their imagination, but without a word for it, what do you call it? You can tell that it's seeing something that isn't really there and you're seeing it within your mind. You can sometimes even feel a pressure at your forehead whenever you use your imagination or try to visualize something strong enough. Perhaps this is the origin of the term third eye, as a way to explain seeing something that your normal eyes cannot see. In other words, visualizing or imagining. Another example of this is the astral plane. When the ancients talk about going out of body and traveling on the astral plane, do they actually believe that your spirit is coming out of your body and going to another place? Or are they talking about dreaming, lucid dreaming to be specific? If you live in a time where dreaming isn't understood and where it's generally accepted that the things that happen to you at night are visions or could possibly be other places that you're visiting before being pulled back to your body when you awaken, it's easy to understand why the concept of the astral plane is actually a drawn-out map of a person's own psyche. To people who practiced lucid dreaming, they practiced purposely going to the astral plane, i.e., purposefully dreaming and controlling those dreams. In most of the old text, the reason for doing astral travel was to learn more about the self, to get in touch with the real self, and to understand the world. In other words, to understand your own subconscious mind by interpreting your own dreams. This is why astral travel as it's practiced today requires you to either be in a dream state already or in a trance state while meditating. In a sense, you are power daydreaming. Instead of simply flowing along with a dream that comes to you or a daydream that pops into your mind, you're using the time that you would normally spend dreaming or daydreaming to search specific information about yourself or about what's been going on in your life. This is why people can have the answers to problems appear to them in dreams. They're actually doing this process of astral travel. But it isn't actually a travel elsewhere. It's simply a travel inward, a way of purposefully being aware while paying attention to what the subconscious is concentrating on and directing the subconscious's focus to whatever problem is at hand. Perhaps this demystifies the idea of traveling out of body, but at the same time it emphasizes why understanding how to do this is so important. If you're someone who knows how to astral travel, you're someone who can find hidden information within your own subconscious mind and pull it to the surface. You're going to be more creative. You're going to be able to solve more of your own problems. You're going to make better use of the time you normally spend daydreaming or dreaming. You're going to be more productive as an individual. Scientifically, we've even begun to induce astral travel as a form of therapy. The difference is that there's an external party, the therapist, who is inducing the state within you through what we call hypnotism. If we pay attention to the process used in hypnotism, what we find is that it starts with a major relaxation and a letting go of paying attention to what the conscious mind is working on. In other words, stop thinking. You then, from that relaxed state, allow your mind to become more susceptible to what you're feeling and experiencing so that you can let that out and focus on it instead. This process is extremely similar to meditation. Meditation is used to help a person focus on their breathing or focus on nothing whatsoever so that they can be in the moment. In a sense, it's used so that you can learn how to drop mind, how to let go of your conscious thinking, so that you can simply exist as your subconscious for a moment in time. Some hypnotists also use hypnosis to help people to alter or change habits. Unlike consciously changing a habit by using repetition again and again and again and again and again to try to force upon the subconscious an understanding of a new way to do things, hypnosis can do a large amount of that legwork for you right out the gate. And as long as you then follow the hypnotic suggestion and achieve good results from it, your subconscious will form new habits on its own. In a sense, a good hypnotist can just implant into the mind of his subject that subject now begin to see his life in a more positive light, and the subconscious mind will try that out, and if it gets good results, will start to form new habits. This, of course, can also be used to form bad habits if the hypnotist is someone who's crooked. With all the self-help books out there teaching us how to do repetition in order to change our habits, it sure would be nice to be able to hypnotize ourselves so that we could push within our minds whatever it is that we want so that we could make the changes to our subconscious on our own. Well, in fact, there is a way to do that, and it's what we call magic. Across all cultures that practice magic or mysticism, there's a method for going into what's called the trance state. A trance state is when we enter a semi-hypnotic state, but one where our own conscious mind maintains control. Usually the process begins by doing some form of meditation in order to drop the conscious to get in touch with the subconscious. And then the trance state process is a process of allowing the conscious to slide back into play, but focused purely on what's going on with the subconscious. This can either be used to pull information from the subconscious to learn about ourselves, or to push information into the subconscious in order to change our own habits. Methods for getting into the trance state include rhythmic drumming, breathing exercises, specialized focus, staring at a candle or flame, or controlled visualization. In other words, it basically requires you to control your conscious mind to a state where you can focus purely on your subconscious. Now, gaining control of the conscious mind is no easy thing, so many of these practices have steps or initiatory grades that you have to go through before you can start performing this on yourself. What these grades do is teach you to increase your focus, to increase your willpower, and to increase your ability to understand the conscious and subconscious. Simply put, they're exercise, but for your mind as opposed to your body. After getting far enough along with the various exercises to where you can control your focus, you move up the grades until you're finally given information about how to perform the actual self-hypnosis that you want. And why is this caution taken amongst the various peoples that practice magic and mysticism? Simply put, self-hypnotizing is dangerous. If you hypnotize yourself to believe something that is completely false, it can screw you up. In fact, many of the different people that believe that there are horrible things out to get them, or that end up in mental institutions as a result of screwing around with magic, do so because they skip the steps before going straight into self-hypnotism. What they've done is hypnotize themselves to believe something that's very negative, and as a result, made themselves a little crazy. And so, going into this is something that you should do with caution. Don't self-hypnotize yourself just for the hell of it. You need to be cautious about what you're doing, you need to be conscious about what you're doing, and you need to have the proper training first. There are many ways to perform self-hypnosis. In fact, you're going to find that almost every magical or occult practice is just a form of self-hypnosis for the purposes of changing some aspect of one's own behavior. The most interesting of these is spellcasting. So the concept of spellcasting is to change something in the outside world using only your will. An example of this is using candle magic, where someone will inscribe a symbol on a candle that represents something to them. They'll burn the candle while focusing on it and allow that energy to go out into the universe, so to speak, in order to make change. What's actually happening here is a change within the person's own mind, not within the world around them. For example, if you perform a spell to bring money into your life, what you're actually doing is performing a self-hypnosis to cause yourself to be more focused on the proper ways of attaining money. You'll start to notice opportunities appear to you, things that they call synchronicities, things lining up that you didn't notice before. But it's actually because you've realigned your subconscious's focus. Your subconscious may not have been aligned with the focus of looking for opportunities for money based on its previous rule set. And by self-hypnotizing yourself to gain wealth, you will start to notice the opportunities as they arise. In fact, to you, it will appear as if opportunities come out of nowhere that never existed before. This is why it's so easy to fall into the trap of the belief that spellcasting is actually causing change outside of the self, when in fact it's just changing the self to notice what you're looking for, and as a result, it does truly change your life in the way that you set forth. How can we prove that this is the case? Well, simply put, anyone who is a practicing magician who uses spellcasting can attest to the truth that they have changed their life radically for the better through the use of spellcasting. They've gained things they never would have gained before, and they can verify with actual proof that they were able to make happen what it is they were looking for. At the same time, all of them can tell you that you can't use magic to win the lottery, or you can't specifically choose the various details of how something will come about, and that a lot of times trying to use magic on a specific subject to change their mind or make them do something doesn't work at all. Why is this? This is quite obviously because the magic works only on yourself, and it isn't magic at all. It is rather self-hypnotism, to believe that you're now capable of obtaining something in particular, thus setting your subconscious on the path to look for it, thus allowing you to find it, thus allowing it to come to pass. If you're someone who previously thought magic was useless, trust me, it's not. Self-hypnotism to gain things in your life that you don't have that you want works magnificently. You realign your own way of thinking to give yourself exactly what you want. There's a danger here in losing what made you believe you were who you were. In other words, in the process of self-hypnotizing and gaining the things that you've always wanted in life, you start to slowly change yourself into the type of person you needed to be to gain those things. And when you look back, you realize that you're not who you used to be. This can be maddening to some people as they realize that their entire persona is nothing more than a set of rules that we've given ourselves, and that we're really nothing more than living beings experiencing the moment. The entire narrative that our conscious mind has created is a fiction, and that can break some people down. This is why you find most people who are engaged in magic for a long time start to believe in something called universal consciousness, or start to believe that we're part of a single whole, or part of a single entity, or part of a single amount of energy. This is by its nature a religious belief, and not something that's required for magical practice, but the reason that so many people come to this conclusion is because they start to notice that there is no specific element of themselves that makes them different from everyone else. Once you learn to pre-program or reprogram yourself, you start to realize that you're nothing more than a set of programming, and that is scary unless you begin to think that maybe you're part of something greater. Some of us who take a more scientific approach to the practice are able to look objectively and say, yes, perhaps the story of my life is something completely fabricated, but I don't care. I still am someone who's learned, as a result of my life, to get what I want and to become who I want, and I still want to work toward my own self-perfection. That is your way out of the black hole, which is the understanding that we are not anything more than our set of decisions. The period of time where you're wrestling with this is often called the abyss or the void in many different religions. Where they say you have to go through a dark night of your soul, this is what they're talking about. Coming out on the other side will allow you to really engage in self-hypnosis at a level you never could before, because you've let go of the old self, instead looking toward the future. Hitting that barrier and not being able to pass it will keep you forever in the realms of being simply a dabbler in magic, but not someone who moves beyond that. What's interesting is, when you start to let go of the self and enter into the idea that self-hypnosis can get you anything you ask for, and that in fact you don't need to concentrate on how that thing will come to you, but rather just what it is you want and allowing your subconscious to seek it out, you start to find that you can make changes that are radical. You do end up being able to affect other people's decisions, but not because you can cause them to be bewitched or changed, but rather because you can change yourself into exactly the type of person who can affect their behaviors and thinking. You start to be able to become someone who can really change the world as a whole simply by changing yourself. This is, in truth, what the ancients were talking about when they were talking about magic and how it can be used to control fate and reality. You change who you are, you change your own destiny, you change the world. But only by first mastering the self can you make any valuable change in the reality around you. The understanding that simultaneously there is nothing special about any of us because there is nothing to any of us, and also that there's something uniquely special about each of us in how we choose to program ourselves, is called enlightenment. Philosophies like Buddhism are built completely around this understanding, and this understanding is often gained through magical practice. I hope this explanation was able to show what magic truly is and how it can be beneficial to those who might have thought it was useless before. The practices of the ancient magics are simply practices of self-hypnosis that can change the self in any way desired, and because you don't need to actually know the specifics of how to do it, you simply need to know what change you want to make. You can even specify a desired thing from the outside world, and your subconscious will align to move toward that. This practice is extremely useful in finding success. It's extremely useful in getting rid of old habits that are bad. It's extremely useful in making yourself have a happier life. And it's extremely useful in becoming more conscious of the fact that all of us are truly equal. Now, I know some people are going to have questions about some of the specific practices and how they could be explained with this explanation I just gave. And in the interest of answering some of those questions up front, I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes reviewing a few different practices. Evocation and invocation, the practice of calling upon entities from outside the self to either speak to them or to allow them to inhabit your body. This is actually reaching into your own subconscious and fragmenting off a piece of yourself to speak to it. Whatever piece represents what that particular entity would represent to you. For example, if you're conjuring demons, you're actually calling up the parts of yourself that you find distasteful. If you're conjuring angels, you're conjuring up the parts of yourself that you find tasteful. For some of us, it works the opposite way around, depending on upbringing. If you're conjuring the gods often represented a certain aspect of the human way of thinking. You're pulling that part of your thinking out and talking to it. It allows you to talk to a part of yourself without the other parts of yourself present. It's a way of getting to know the self. Nothing more, nothing less. Most people who work with demons in evocation and invocation do so as a method of getting used to things inside of themselves that they see as disgusting. You can either banish, quote-unquote, the demon to get rid of that aspect of yourself, or you can learn to accept the demon and transform it into a more positive force. These processes are all processes of reprogramming the subconscious mind so that those aspects of yourself that you see as negative can become positive or be abolished altogether, and so that those processes that you see as positive can be expanded upon. If you are calling upon such entities to perform a task for you to change the world around you, what you're actually doing is calling upon those aspects of yourself to become aware and ready to move on those actions. The same way that you were calling upon your subconscious mind to focus on certain things within the world around you through the spellcasting methods. Something to note here is that all of the work you do in any of these magical practices takes place in the trance state, and in the trance state we see things the way our subconscious understands them, which is through symbology and metaphor. So symbols have a stronger ability to impress something upon the mind, but also what we see and experience will be more like a trippy Alice in Wonderland type of experience. You may see physical demons whenever you conjure up demons. You may see physical angels or physical gods, but these are just representations of the self, seen through the imagination. Energy work and energy healing relies on the belief that there is energy in and around our body that we can manipulate using our own minds. If you practice energy work, you'll notice that everything you do within it relies on focus. Focusing on a certain spot in your body, focusing on a certain emotion, things of this nature. What you may actually be doing is simply telling your subconscious mind what to focus on, what to fix within your body, how to do things. There's scientific proof that if you focus on your muscles while working out, you get a better workout. There's scientific proof that if you focus on a particular spot in your body, you send more blood flow to that spot in your body. Obviously, your focus ties strongly to what the subconscious pays attention to. And if you pay attention to solving a problem like a disease, you may be able to heal it faster. Performing energy work on another person could easily be a form of hypnotism to get them to do the same thing to themselves that you are able to do. Divination is the process of seeing into the future or divining things that are hidden, such as truths from lies and the locations of water sources and such. This too is largely just a process of pulling information out of your subconscious mind that you already know. There's a lot of things that we've seen, that we've experienced, that we don't remember, that can give us answers to questions that we think we may never find the answers to. Our subconscious mind and our conscious mind are repositories of information that we often don't know how to access, but divination is just a process of doing that. Finally, I'd like to end with a little bit on astrology. I know there are going to be people out there that say astrology is one of the topics I've covered before that is not covered by this theory, and they're correct. Astrology is not a form of self-hypnotism. It's one of the only practices that's not covered here. But to give a scientific explanation for astrology, all one has to do is understand that the stars and the planetary bodies in the heavens can be used as a clock. In the past, we didn't understand how the Earth revolved around the sun or how any of the planetary bodies moved, but we did notice that they moved in an orderly fashion. Things repeated, and as they did, they matched up to the different cycles on the Earth. The different constellations moved across the sky every year, and when certain constellations were in the sky, it was cold, and when certain constellations were in the sky, it was warm. What astrology was the first clock, before clocks, an understanding of when it was time to plant seeds, when it was time to harvest, an understanding of when cold times were coming, or when the warmth of summer was on its way. It also became a method of tracking births and of tracking the differences in people, as people who are born in the summer genuinely have different personalities from people born in the winter, and so on. The conditional effects of when someone's born do affect them. In fact, these effects are on a subconscious level. In early child development, if you're kept indoors for longer periods, you're going to have a different personality than if in early child development you're kept outside for long periods. This is why things like the zodiac and astrology still work, even though we understand now why the planetary bodies move in the heavens, because it's really just a tracking of when things occurred in a cycle, and those cycles do exist. They just aren't related specifically to the planets themselves. So, in conclusion, I'd like to end by saying, magic is not the supernatural force that so many people claim it to be. However, magic is not a fiction. The practices used by the ancients were a method of changing the self. The reason the ancient magi's and alchemists saw the normal people as base and needing of change and saw themselves as enlightened was because they understood how to change their own programming of their own subconscious mind, and they understood that a better world could be born of this, and that those who didn't would be doomed to repeat the sins of their parents. We are now reaching a time in history where we're intelligent enough to understand this in a non-mystical way, and it's my hope that we'll start to develop new methods for self-hypnosis, methods that maybe don't need to seem so mystical. And by developing and accepting that these are natural processes that we can all take, we each take control of the evolution of our own subconscious. We become our own evolution into whoever it is that we want to be. I believe that if science would take these practices seriously and demystify them and pull apart that which works within them, we would be able to create a society that was far better than where we live now, a society where we weren't slave to our upbringings, a society where we aren't slave to our bad behaviors, a society where we can pick and choose who it is we want to be. A word of caution, however. As we unravel the mysteries of controlling the subconscious mind, we must refrain from forcing others into a certain way of thinking. If any one group was given the power to dictate what we each needed to hypnotize ourselves to believe, they would have complete control over the planet. Some people believe such a group already exists. Until next time, safe travels.